I'm looking at this light. It's not like sunlight or moonlight or any light I've ever known. It's soft, but it's present. It's like the air, but it's luminous. And the dominant color, if you can call it that, is this incredible emerald. Not the harsh green of an emerald gem, but something deeper, something that hums. It feels like a lullaby for my bones. I can feel it vibrating through me, a low, resonant hum like the earth breathing. It's a perfect neutrality in temperature, not hot, not cold, just settled. Every nerve, every cell, it's all just still. There's no weight, no pressure, no ache. My chest, which felt like it was being crushed, is now utterly free. It's an unearned sense of enough, like I've finally arrived. And it's okay. I don't know how to describe it, really. It wasn't a color I've ever seen. It was more like color as a feeling, like pure, unadulterated acceptance. I'm just floating, I guess. But it's not like being in water. It's more like being suspended in consciousness itself. And this feeling, this profound sense of being enough, it washes over me. And I know with a certainty that bypasses thought that this is what it's like to finally be home. It's so much more than I ever imagined. And then I was in the hospital. My name is Maria Elena Rodriguez. I'm 58 years old. I'm a court reporter, bilingual. For most of my life, that's meant deadlines, precision, capturing every single word, every pause, every inflection. Compulsive perfectionist is an understatement. If I missed a word, if I misheard something, it felt like a physical wound. I'd replay it in my head for days, a silent, internal courtroom where I was always found guilty. I was raised Catholic, but somewhere along the way, between the late nights transcribing depositions and the sheer exhaustion of trying to be flawless at everything, I drifted. I didn't believe in anything I couldn't touch, couldn't hear with my own ears, and certify as accurate. My husband, David, bless his patient soul, he'd try to get me to relax, but my mind was always racing ahead, checking, rechecking, ensuring nothing slipped through the cracks. And then there was Mateo, my son, my estranged teenage son. That was a whole other level of anxiety, of regret, of feeling like I'd failed spectacularly in the one job that truly mattered. For years, it was silence, polite, distant calls on holidays. Then, a few months ago, something shifted. He started talking to me again, really talking, awkwardly at first, hesitant, like he was testing the waters. But it was happening. We were finding our way back to each other. It was fragile, this new connection, and I found myself holding my breath, terrified of saying or doing the wrong thing, of pushing him away again. I remember last Tuesday, I was sitting at my kitchen table, the late afternoon sun streaming in, trying to proofread a transcript. Buster, our golden retriever, was asleep at my feet, his tail giving a little thump thump every so often. I was so focused on a comma placement, a microscopic error, that I didn't even notice David walk in with groceries. He just put them on the counter. "Hey, honey," he said, his voice soft. I just nodded, my eyes still glued to the screen. "Did you get those shrimp for dinner tonight?" he asked. I barely registered it. "Uh-huh," I mumbled, my brain already on the next sentence. Shrimp. Yeah, I think I'd put shrimp on the list. Just a normal Tuesday. Nothing felt out of place, or so I thought. Did you have any sense looking back that something was coming? It's funny, isn't it, how the universe sends these little whispers, and we're too busy trying to be perfect to hear them. In the days leading up to it, I'd been feeling off. Not sick exactly, just a strange sort of static in the air. I remember one morning I was making my coffee, the usual ritual, the precise grind, the perfect water temperature, and I dropped the carafe. It shattered. Coffee went everywhere. It was so unlike me. I'm usually so grounded in my movements, especially in the kitchen. And I just stood there, staring at the mess, and for a split second, I felt this absolute bone-deep weariness. Like I didn't have the energy to clean it up. I chalked it up to being tired, to the stress of Mateo starting to talk to me again. I was overthinking everything. My brain just felt overloaded. Then the day it happened, I was sitting at my laptop, and for some reason, I kept looking out the window. The sky was a perfect, cloudless blue, the kind of Texas sky that makes you squint. And I remember thinking, with a bizarre clarity, that I should really take Buster for a long walk. It was a thought so out of the blue, so uncharacteristic for me on a Tuesday afternoon when I was usually deep in transcription work. I dismissed it, just a fleeting thought. I was so focused on the digital words on the screen, on the absolute necessity of perfection that I missed the real world nudging me, trying to get my attention. The internal and external signs, they were there. Tiny cracks in the facade of my controlled existence. But I was too busy polishing the surface to notice the foundation shifting. It was Tuesday, October 17th, 2023, late afternoon. The sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows across our lawn in Plano. I was in the kitchen, standing at the counter, humming a little tune, a rare moment of quiet contentment. David was in the living room, probably reading, with Buster curled up at his feet. The air was still, warm from the lingering Texas heat, but not oppressive. I could hear the faint chirp of crickets starting their evening song. I was unwrapping some fresh shrimp, thinking about a simple garlic butter sauce, something David loved. It was so ordinary. And then it hit. It wasn't a pain, not at first. It was a pressure, a sudden, suffocating tightness in my chest, radiating up into my throat. It felt like an invisible hand had clamped down, squeezing the air out of me. My breath hitched. I gasped, but no air came in. My vision started to tunnel. The vibrant colors of the kitchen, the pale green cabinets, the granite countertops, they seemed to dim, to recede. I felt a wave of heat, then a chilling cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. "David," I croaked, but the sound didn't even leave my lips. It was like my vocal cords were being constricted. My knees buckled. I remember seeing Buster lift his head, his ears perked, a low whine starting in his chest. David's voice, a distant, concerned call, "Maria, everything okay?" And then I knew. With a chilling certainty that settled deep into my bones, I knew I was dying. The world tilted. The last thing I saw, before the darkness completely consumed me, was the patterned tile of my kitchen floor rushing up to meet me. The last sensation wasn't pain, but a profound sense of disconnection. Like my body was a suit I was rapidly outgrowing. Paramedics later told David I was clinically dead for approximately 5 minutes. They said when they arrived, my heart had stopped. The monitors were flatlining. But for me, those 5 minutes were an eternity. The shift wasn't like a fade. It was more like being gently, irrevocably unzipped from my physical form. One moment, I was falling towards the floor. The next, I was elsewhere. It wasn't a sudden transport, not like stepping through a door. It was more like the very fabric of reality around me dissolved, and I was instantaneously present in a new, impossible space. Imagine being a tightly wound spring, and then with absolute grace, you're just released. The feeling wasn't of movement, but of a profound arrival. And the first thing that struck me wasn't a sight, but a sensation. It was the absence of effort, the absence of strain. My lungs, which had been burning and useless, were now just there. Not functioning, but simply existing, without any need to draw a breath. My body, the one that had just betrayed me so brutally, felt like a memory, a shed skin. I had no weight, no physical limitations. It was like waking up from a long, exhausting dream. And then the environment began to coalesce. It wasn't built or constructed. It simply was. The dominant color, as I mentioned, was this soft, shimmering emerald. It wasn't like looking at a green object. It was more like being immersed in greenness. A palpable, textured emerald that felt like the most comforting sound imaginable. It hummed, a low, resonant vibration that I felt not in my ears, but in the core of my being, like the earth itself was exhaling. The light wasn't originating from a source. It was just there, like air is present. Does that make sense? It was like liquid moonlight, cool and enveloping, yet somehow luminous. It painted everything, this gentle glow, and I felt it against my skin, though I didn't have skin in the way I understood it. It was a perfect neutrality, a temperature that soothed every nerve ending. And within this overwhelming sensory landscape, I recognized a feeling, a profound, unearned sense of being enough. It wasn't tied to accomplishment, or to anyone's approval, or to ticking off boxes. It was a pure, unadulterated state of being, like I had finally come home to myself. I was observing all of this, and then I perceived a presence. It wasn't something I saw in a conventional sense. It was more like an awareness that bloomed in my periphery, then gently turned towards me. I felt a recognition, a deep, ancient knowing, and the emotion that rose in me was so pure, so overwhelming, it brought tears to my eyes, if I had eyes to cry with. It was the child I had carried for only 12 weeks, the one I had grieved in quiet moments, the one I had silently blamed myself for losing, for not being strong enough, for not doing something differently. Her presence wasn't sorrowful or judgmental. It was radiant, a soft, gentle light that radiated love. And in that moment, I didn't just see her, I understood her. I felt her love, a vibrant, undeniable force. And with that love came a message. It wasn't spoken, not in words I could hear. It was a knowing, implanted directly into my consciousness, clear and absolute. The little girl you carried for only 12 weeks is thriving. She sends you her love and says you did your best. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow, not of pain, but of profound release. My carefully constructed edifice of guilt, of self-recrimination, it crumbled. You did your best. It was the absolution I had never dared to ask for. The core of my lifelong struggle, my compulsion to be perfect, to never falter, it was rooted in the unspoken grief and self-blame over that lost pregnancy. And here, in this emerald luminescence, I was being told I was enough, that I had done enough. It was a revelation that cracked me wide open. I saw my life not as a series of failures or near misses, but as a journey. I saw moments of striving, moments of love, moments of profound, if flawed, effort. The perfectionism that had defined me, that had driven me, it suddenly seemed so unnecessary, like a heavy coat I had been wearing in a perfectly temperate climate. The child's presence, this being of pure, unconditional love, it was showing me that my worth wasn't contingent on my performance. It was inherent. She was thriving, and her message was a gift of forgiveness, not just from her, but from myself. I felt a lightness I had never experienced, a freedom from the constant, gnawing need to be better, to do more, to never make a mistake. It was a radical acceptance of myself, flaws and all. The feeling of being enough intensified, filling every atom of my being. It was the most profound peace I had ever known, or could have ever imagined. What was the message? Can you say it out loud? The pullback was violent, not like the gentle release into the afterlife, but a sudden, agonizing snap. It felt like being yanked by a powerful, unseen force, dragged unwillingly through thick, viscous water. My body was heavy, dense, and I could feel every single cell screaming in protest at being reanimated. It was cold. Terribly, excruciatingly cold. And the sounds, oh God, the sounds. The beeping of machines. The sterile clang of metal. The hushed, urgent voices of strangers. It was a cacophony compared to the resonant hum of the emerald light. My first sensation of consciousness was the rough texture of a hospital sheet against my cheek and the blinding glare of fluorescent lights overhead. I opened my eyes, and David was there, his face etched with worry, his hand gripping mine tightly. Buster was nowhere to be seen, probably banned from the ICU. "Maria?" he whispered, his voice thick with relief. "Maria, you're back. Oh, thank God." I tried to speak, to tell him where I'd been, what I'd seen, but my throat felt raw, like sandpaper. I managed a raspy sound. The world felt too loud, too bright, solid, too separate. The connection I had felt so deeply, the pervasive sense of unity, it was gone, replaced by this jarring, fragmented reality. My body felt like a prison again, heavy and cumbersome. The paramedics had done a fantastic job, David told me later. They'd managed to get my heart beating again, to stabilize me. But the doctors were baffled. They kept saying it was a miracle I'd pulled through. But I knew, with a certainty that surpassed any medical explanation, that it wasn't a miracle in the way they meant. It was a consequence, a gift. And the first conversation I had with David, once I could finally form words, wasn't about the shrimp or the paramedics or my recovery. It was about Matteo. I asked him to call Matteo. I needed to tell him. I needed him to know. The first few days in the hospital were a blur. Visitors came and went, a procession of well-meaning friends and family. They offered prayers, casseroles, and stories about how David had been beside himself. I nodded, I thanked them, but a part of me felt detached, an observer in my own life. The real work, the real change, began when I got home. I started small. I stopped replaying every conversation in my head, dissecting it for perceived flaws. When Matteo called, and he did, regularly now, I just listened. I didn't interrupt with advice or try to fix his problems. I just let him talk. I remembered my compulsive perfectionism, how it had driven a wedge between me and the people I loved. I realized it wasn't about being perfect, it was about being present. One afternoon, I was transcribing a particularly dense legal argument, my old instincts kicking in, my fingers itching to flag every misplaced comma. I caught myself. I looked out the window at the same Texas sky that had seemed so significant just days before. And I smiled. I closed the file. I decided to take Buster for that walk I'd thought of on the day I died. It was a simple act, but for me, it was monumental. The air felt cleaner, the grass greener, the world more vibrant. I noticed the way the sunlight dappled through the leaves, the distant bark of another dog. I was finally seeing it, not just analyzing it. When I tried to explain to my sister what had happened, she just patted my hand and told me I'd had a scare and was probably seeing things more clearly now. She didn't understand. How could she? The heightened empathic sensitivity. That's the lingering after effect that's the most profound. I feel the subtle emotional undercurrents of people around me. It's like I can sense their unspoken anxieties, their hidden joys. It can be overwhelming sometimes. I'll be at the grocery store, and I'll suddenly feel this wave of frustration from someone in the checkout line, or a surge of quiet happiness from a parent with a toddler. It's like I'm mirroring their emotions, but on a deeper, more fundamental level. It's not always easy, but it has made me so much more patient, so much more understanding. I'm not demanding perfection from myself anymore, and that's allowed me to stop demanding it from others too. I'm still Maria Elena Rodriguez, the court reporter, but I'm also someone who knows that being enough is the greatest accomplishment of all. Last Thursday, I was at David's company picnic. There was this new hire, a young woman, looking completely out of place, overwhelmed by all the mingling. I saw her fidgeting with her plate, her shoulders hunched. Instead of just continuing my conversation, I walked over to her. I didn't ask if she was okay or tell her to relax. I just smiled and said, "Hey, I'm Maria. This potato salad is surprisingly good. You should try it." She looked at me, really looked at me, and a tiny smile flickered across her face. We talked for a few minutes. It was small. It was ordinary. But for me, it was everything. It was small. It was ordinary. But for me, it was everything. My husband, David, watches me sometimes. I can feel it, that gentle, almost imperceptible shift in his gaze, the slight tilt of his head as he tries to decipher the new landscape of my being. He doesn't question it, not directly. He's seen the change, felt the shift. He used to joke that I was like a finely tuned Swiss watch, every gear perfectly placed, every movement precise. Now he says, I'm more like a river, still flowing, still powerful, but with a natural grace, a willingness to follow the contours of the land. He doesn't understand the emerald light, the hum, or the profound sense of being enough. He understands the wife who is no longer consumed by the fear of error, the mother who is present for her son, the woman who is finally at peace. And for him, that's enough. Mateo, my son, that's still the tenderest spot, the one where I tread most carefully. The gulf between us, forged by years of my driven perfectionism, had been immense. I had been so focused on providing him with a perfect life, on ensuring he had every advantage, that I had forgotten to simply be with him. My drive for excellence, my need to control every outcome, had stifled his own burgeoning independence, his own unique path. I had mistaken discipline for connection, achievement for love. And in my relentless pursuit of flawlessness, I had inadvertently created a chasm. The silence after his departure for college had been deafening, punctuated only by the hollow echo of my own regrets. Each unanswered text, each curt email was a testament to my failure. And then, the allergic reaction. The sudden, terrifying realization that my meticulously crafted world could be shattered in an instant. It was only in those final, gasping moments that the futility of my lifelong quest for perfection truly dawned on me. When Mateo started speaking to me again, it was like a fragile seedling pushing through hardened soil. His words were tentative, hesitant, laced with the uncertainty of years of distance. My first instinct, the old Maria, was to immediately strategize, to plan the perfect response, to calculate the optimal way to nurture this nascent connection without a single misstep. But the memory of the emerald light, the echo of that profound, unearned sense of enough, held me back. I forced myself to simply listen, to be present, to resist the urge to fill every silence, to correct every perceived error in his narration of his life. It was excruciatingly difficult. My fingers itched to type out suggestions, my mind raced with helpful anecdotes and life lessons. But I held my tongue. I focused on his voice, on the nuances of his tone, on the unspoken emotions swirling beneath his words. I began to notice things I had previously overlooked in my own frantic existence. The way his voice cracked when he spoke of a disappointment, the subtle shift in his energy when he was excited about something. I was learning to read him again, not as a project to be managed, but as a unique individual, a soul deserving of my full, unadulterated attention. One evening, he called and told me he was struggling with a particular class. The old me would have launched into a lecture on study habits, recommended tutors, and possibly even offered to ghostwrite his essays. But this new Maria, the one who had felt the universe breathe and heard the silent song of a lost child, simply said, "Tell me about it, Matteo. What's making it so tough?" He poured out his frustrations, his fears of failure, his anxieties about his future, and I didn't offer solutions. I didn't chastise or advise, I just listened. And as he spoke, I could feel the subtle undercurrent of his despair, the quiet plea for understanding. And in that moment, I felt a surge of empathy, so potent, so clear, it was almost overwhelming. It wasn't just pity, it was a deep, resonant understanding of his struggle, a feeling of shared vulnerability. It was as if I could feel the weight of his academic burden pressing down on him, and I instinctively wanted to lighten it, not by taking it away, but by simply acknowledging its presence. "It sounds really hard," I said, my voice soft, laced with a genuine tenderness I hadn't realized I possessed. "It's okay to feel overwhelmed, you know. It doesn't mean you're not smart enough or capable enough. It just means you're human and you're facing a challenge." There was a long pause on his end of the line. I held my breath, bracing for the familiar withdrawal, the polite dismissal. But instead, he said, his voice thick with emotion, "Mom, thank you. Really. I just needed to hear that. That thank you was worth more than any perfect transcript, any flawless execution. It was a crack in the armor, a moment of genuine connection. It was the sound of healing, of bridges being rebuilt, one hesitant word at a time. And it was all because I had stopped trying to be the perfect arbiter of his life and had instead become a compassionate witness to his journey. The heightened empathic sensitivity continues to be a source of both wonder and challenge. It's like an extra layer of sensory input, a constant stream of emotional data. Walking into a crowded room is no longer just about navigating physical space. It's about navigating a sea of unspoken feelings. Sometimes it's a symphony of shared joy, a wedding reception, a birthday party, where the collective happiness creates a palpable warmth. Other times, it's a jarring dissonance of anxiety and frustration, a busy ER waiting room, a tense business meeting where the collective unease feels like a physical pressure. I've learned to create mental shields, to consciously filter out the overwhelming noise, but it's an ongoing practice. It's like learning to play a new instrument, the nuances and techniques taking time to master. But the benefits far outweigh the difficulties. It has made me a better listener, not just to words, but to what lies beneath them. I find myself instinctively understanding what people need, even when they can't articulate it themselves. I've become more patient, more forgiving, both of myself and of others. The rigid expectations I once held for everyone, including myself, have softened considerably. I see the inherent worth in every individual, the quiet struggles they all carry. It's a profound shift from my previous worldview, where success was measured by tangible achievements and perceived flaws were grounds for self-criticism. There are still moments, of course, when the old habits try to creep back in. A particularly challenging transcription, a complex legal brief, and the familiar urge to obsess over every detail can resurface. But now, I have a counterpoint. I can recall the feeling of the emerald light, the resonant hum, the absolute certainty of being enough, and it anchors me. It reminds me that my value isn't tied to my productivity or my precision. It's inherent. It's simply in being Maria Elena Rodriguez, a woman who has experienced the profound grace of unconditional love and the transformative power of self-compassion. The memory of that child, my child, is not a source of pain anymore. It is a beacon, a reminder of the vastness of love, of the resilience of the soul. I imagine her, not as a lost potential, but as a vibrant being in a place of pure light and love, a place where she thrives. And knowing that she sends me her love, and that she understands I did my best, is the ultimate absolution. It has allowed me to finally extend that same grace to myself. This journey of transformation is ongoing. I'm still learning, still growing, but I no longer fear the unknown. I no longer strive for an unattainable perfection. I simply exist in this moment with a deep and abiding sense of gratitude. I am present, I am loved, and I am, finally and irrevocably, enough. The static is gone, the hum remains, and in that hum, I find my peace. My life, once a tightly controlled narrative, has become a flowing, vibrant story full of unexpected turns and profound discoveries, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. The late afternoon sun still streams through my kitchen window, the crickets still sing their evening song, and Buster still naps contentedly at my feet. But now I see it all with new eyes, with a heart that finally understands the true meaning of living, and it is beautiful. The late afternoon sun still streams through my kitchen window, the crickets still sing their evening song, and Buster still naps contentedly at my feet. But now I see it all with new eyes, with a heart that finally understands the true meaning of living, and it is beautiful. Block 5. Afterlife. Target 10,000 to 14,000 characters. The transition was less of a journey and more of an immersion. One moment, I was tethered to the rapidly fading, increasingly heavy reality of my physical body, a frantic struggle for air being my sole occupation. The next, I was unbound, adrift in an ocean of pure sensation, where form and substance were mere suggestions. The initial shock of disconnection, the tearing away from the only existence I had ever known, gave way almost immediately to an astonishing sense of liberation. It was as if a lifelong constriction had been released, not with a bang, but with a sigh of perfect, effortless freedom. The emerald light wasn't just a visual phenomenon. It was an experience that permeated every fiber of my newly liberated consciousness. It was a color that could be heard, a sound that could be felt, a temperature that carried the weight of all understanding. It was soft, yet it had presence, a luminous quality that defied any earthly comparison. It was like liquid moonlight, cool and enveloping, a balm to every nerve ending that had been so recently set ablaze with panic and suffocation. The low, resonant hum, like the earth breathing, vibrated not through my eardrums, but through the very essence of my being. It was a lullaby for the soul, a deep, primordial resonance that whispered of an ancient, abiding peace. And the temperature. Oh, the temperature. It was neither warm nor cold, but a perfect neutrality that settled every cell, every lingering tremor of fear or anxiety. It was a state of absolute equilibrium, a stillness that was not absence but fullness. It was the feeling of being cradled, of being held in a space that was inherently safe, inherently right. Then came the emotion. It was not an emotion I had ever experienced or even conceived of. It was a profound, unearned sense of being enough. Not good enough, not perfect enough, but simply, utterly enough. It wasn't a reward or a recognition of deeds done. It was a fundamental state of being, as if I had finally come home to myself, to the core of who I was, stripped bare of all striving, all doubt, all expectation. This feeling washed over me, not like a wave, but like an inherent property of the space I now occupied. It was more than acceptance, it was validation. It was the silent, irrefutable knowing that my existence in its entirety was sufficient. It was in this state of absolute surrender and profound peace that I perceived a presence. It wasn't something that materialized or announced itself. It was more like a gentle unfolding, an awareness that bloomed in my peripheral consciousness and then gracefully turned towards me. There was no physical form as I understood it, no features to discern, yet there was an undeniable identity. A recognition, deep and ancient, resonated within me. And with that recognition came an overwhelming surge of an emotion so pure, so potent, it transcended any earthly feeling. It was love. Unconditional, boundless, radiant love. I understood, with a clarity that bypassed all logical processing, that this was the child I had carried for only 12 weeks. The one whose absence had carved a silent, perpetual ache in my heart. The one I had often blamed myself for losing, for not being strong enough, for not doing more. There was no accusation in her presence, no sadness, only a gentle, luminous emanation of pure joy and an astonishing level of peace. It was as if she was radiating the very essence of the emerald light that enveloped me. And then came the message. It wasn't a spoken word, not a whisper in my ear. It was a direct transmission, a knowing implanted into the very fabric of my consciousness, as clear and undeniable as the emerald light itself. It was a message of profound comfort and absolute forgiveness. The little girl you carried for only 12 weeks is thriving. The words, if they could be called words, landed not with a shock, but with a gentle unfolding, like a perfectly formed blossom opening to the sun. They resonated with an inherent truth that bypassed all my ingrained skepticism and self-doubt. She was thriving. My lost child, my silent grief, was not lost at all. She was in a place of vibrant existence, of pure being. She sends you her love. And I felt it. Not just an abstract concept, but a tangible, palpable wave of affection, a pure emanation of love that embraced me, that filled the void I had carried for so long. It was a love that asked for nothing in return, a love that simply was. It was a validation of my own capacity for love, a love I had often doubted in myself, and says you did your best. These were the words that shattered the foundations of my lifelong obsession. You did your best. The weight that had settled upon my shoulders with the first breath I took, the relentless pursuit of flawlessness, the gnawing fear of inadequacy, all of it began to dissolve. My compulsive perfectionism, the very engine of my existence, was suddenly revealed as a futile, unnecessary burden. I saw the striving, the meticulous attention to detail, the constant anxiety about making mistakes, not as virtues, but as misguided attempts to compensate for an imagined deficiency. My grief over that pregnancy had been immense, a silent testament to my perceived failure. I had carried the unspoken accusation that if I had been stronger, more careful, more perfect, perhaps it would have survived. And here, in this ethereal realm of emerald light and resonant hum, I was being told that my best was not only acceptable, but was, in fact, enough. It was an absolution I had never dared to seek, a forgiveness that was offered freely, unconditionally. The emerald light seemed to deepen, to swirl around me with a renewed intensity, as if in response to this profound revelation. The feeling of being enough intensified, spreading through me like a warm current. It was as if every cell in my being was finally sighing with relief, releasing the tension of decades of self-imposed judgment. I saw my life, not as a series of missteps and near misses, but as a tapestry woven with threads of effort, intention, and love, however imperfectly executed. The child's presence was a gentle balm, her love a potent elixir. She was not a symbol of my failure, but a testament to the enduring power of connection, to the infinite capacity for love that exists beyond the limitations of the physical world. Her message wasn't just about her own well-being, it was about my own. It was an invitation to extend that same grace, that same understanding, to myself. I understood then that my perfectionism wasn't about control or excellence. It was a desperate attempt to outrun an imagined condemnation. It was a shield against the perceived judgment of a world I felt I constantly had to prove myself to. But in this space, there was no judgment, only acceptance. There was no need for performance, only for being. The realization was so profound, so transformative, that it felt like a fundamental recalibration of my very being. The concept of doing my best expanded to encompass not just my efforts, but my intentions, my vulnerabilities, my very humanity. It meant that even in my moments of struggle, of doubt, of perceived failure, I was still worthy. I was still loved. And I was, at my core, enough. The emerald luminescence seemed to pulse, a gentle affirmation of this newfound understanding. I felt a sense of profound gratitude, not just for the child, but for the experience itself. It was a gift, a sacred offering that had finally allowed me to shed the heavy cloak of my lifelong striving. I was free, free from the tyranny of perfection, free from the crushing weight of self-recrimination. I was simply present, bathed in an infinite, unconditional love, and utterly, irrevocably enough. The sense of being suspended in consciousness itself, as I had described it, now felt less like a passive state and more like an active participation in a vibrant, loving existence. It was a continuum of awareness, a boundless expanse where time and space held no dominion. The emerald glow wasn't just a backdrop. It was the very substance of this reality, a palpable medium that held everything together with an invisible, loving force. I continued to bask in this state, absorbing the profound peace and the unearned sense of validation. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated grace, a space where every perceived flaw, every regret, every fear simply dissolved. The clarity was absolute, the understanding complete. My entire life, with all its imperfections and struggles, was viewed not through the lens of judgment, but through the eyes of infinite compassion. The child's message was not just words, it was a complete redefinition of my worth, a gift of self acceptance that rippled through my being, healing wounds I hadn't even realized were so deep. This was the true homecoming, the ultimate arrival. And then the gentle tug. It wasn't violent, not like the panicked gasping for air that had preceded my arrival. It was a subtle, insistent pull, like the turning of a tide, a gentle redirection back towards the realm I had momentarily left. The emerald light began to soften, the resonant hum to recede, not disappearing but becoming a distant echo, a cherished memory imprinted on my soul. There was a sense of inevitability, of a process that was unfolding with its own natural rhythm. I felt no resistance, only a profound sense of gratitude for the time spent in that sacred space and a quiet readiness for whatever came next. The experience had fundamentally altered my perception of reality, of myself, and of the interconnectedness of all things. It was a truth that would now guide my every step, a whisper of emerald light that would forever resonate within me. Block 6. Return. Target 4,000 to 5,000 characters. The shift back was jarring. Not a gentle reawakening, but an abrupt, almost violent re-entry into a world that felt impossibly dense, heavy, and loud. The absence of the emerald luminescence was like a sudden plunge into darkness, the resonant hum replaced by a chaotic cacophony of beeps, whirs, and the hurried, clipped voices of strangers. My body, which had felt so weightless and free, was now an anchor, a leaden weight dragging me down. The profound stillness of the afterlife was shattered by the relentless, intrusive reality of physical sensation. My first conscious awareness was the rough, starchy texture of a hospital gown against my cheek, a stark contrast to the silken embrace of the emerald light. Above me, the fluorescent lights of the intensive care unit glared with an almost aggressive intensity, a harsh, unforgiving illumination that seemed to mock the gentle glow I had just experienced. My lungs, which had been so effortlessly present in that other realm, now burned with a familiar, terrifying tightness. Each inhale was a labor, a desperate, rasping fight for the air that had been so readily available moments before. David's face swam into focus, etched with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. His hand, warm and firm, clasped mine, his thumb stroking my knuckles in a gesture of desperate reassurance. His voice, when he spoke, was thick with emotion, a broken whisper of gratitude. "Maria, oh Maria, you're back, thank God." "Maria," he whispered, his voice thick with relief. "Maria, you're back. Oh, thank God." I tried to respond, to tell him where I had been, to convey the profound peace and the astonishing revelation I had received. But my throat felt like it had been scoured with sand. The words I desperately wanted to articulate were trapped behind a wall of pain and exhaustion. A pathetic, raspy sound escaped my lips, a mere shadow of my former voice. The world felt too sharp, too loud, too separate. The profound sense of unity, of interconnectedness that had permeated the emerald space was gone, replaced by a jarring, fragmented reality where everything was distinct, isolated. My body felt like a prison again, a clumsy, cumbersome vessel that confined me. The paramedics, as David later recounted, had performed a miracle. They had revived my heart, stabilized me, and against all odds, brought me back from the brink. The doctors, he told me, were baffled, calling it a miracle. But I knew. I knew with a certainty that transcended any medical explanation that this wasn't just a miracle, it was a consequence, a profound gift. The transition back was disorienting, a painful recalibration from the infinite to the finite. The ethereal lightness of being was replaced by the stark, undeniable weight of my physical form. The sounds of the hospital were a jarring assault on senses accustomed to the gentle hum of the afterlife. The sterile smell, the cool air that seemed to bite at my exposed skin, the constant, rhythmic beeping of machines all served to underscore my unwelcome return to the tangible world. David's presence was an anchor, his steady hand a lifeline in the turbulent sea of my reawakening. His relief was palpable, a wave of emotion that washed over me, grounding me in this new, albeit disorienting, reality. I squeezed his hand, a silent affirmation that I was indeed back, though the Maria who had left had been irrevocably changed. The immediate aftermath was a blur of medical professionals, hushed conversations, and the lingering phantom sensation of the emerald light. My mind, still clinging to the echoes of that other realm, struggled to reconcile the two realities. The profound sense of enough that had settled so peacefully within me now felt like a distant dream, a whisper of a truth I was desperate to hold on to. The intensity of the experience had left me physically weakened, but mentally, I felt a strange new clarity. The panic and fear that had accompanied the onset of the anaphylactic shock were replaced by a quiet resolve. I had seen beyond the veil, and that vision had imprinted itself on my very soul. The first coherent thought that solidified amidst the haze of medication and physical discomfort was about Matteo. He was the reason I had been struggling to hold on to life, the fragile connection that had begun to mend. I needed him to know. I needed him to understand that I had received a message of love and forgiveness, that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of our relationship. "David," I croaked, the sound barely audible. "Call Matteo." He looked at me, his brow furrowed with concern, perhaps thinking it was the delirium of my condition. But the intensity in my gaze must have conveyed something else, something beyond the medical. "Call Matteo," I repeated, my voice a little stronger this time, fueled by a desperate urgency. "I need to tell him. I need him to know." He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine, a silent promise to fulfill my request. And as he reached for his phone, I closed my eyes, not in surrender to the darkness, but in a quiet embrace of the light that still shimmered within me, a beacon guiding me through the arduous journey of return. The physical discomfort was immense, a stark reminder of the fragility of life, but the peace I had found, the absolute certainty of being enough, was a formidable shield against the pain. I was back, but I was not the same. The Emerald experience had been a profound recalibration, and the task now was to integrate that truth into the fabric of my earthly existence. The path ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in my life, I felt truly prepared to face it, armed with a peace that surpassed all understanding. Block 7. Transformation. Target 5,500 to 6,500 characters. The days that followed my return from the brink were a strange tapestry of physical recovery and profound internal recalibration. The hospital room, with its sterile efficiency and the constant, reassuring presence of David, became a sanctuary of sorts, a quiet space for my consciousness to begin piecing itself back together. Visitors came and went, a blur of concerned faces and well-meaning platitudes. They spoke of miracles, of second chances, of my husband's unwavering devotion. I nodded, I offered weak smiles, I thanked them for their kindness, but a part of me remained detached, an observer in the unfolding drama of my own survival. My mind was still replaying the emerald light, the resonant hum, the child's message. These were not memories to be filed away. They were living truths, actively reshaping my perception of reality. When David finally called Matteo, as I had pleaded, I was filled with a nervous anticipation that was entirely new to me. The old Maria would have been meticulously planning the perfect phrasing, rehearsing the optimal emotional tone, ensuring every word landed with precision and impact. But the new Maria, the one who had been infused with the simple, unearned knowing of being enough, simply waited. And when Matteo's voice, hesitant at first, then filled with a rush of genuine concern, came through the phone, I didn't strategize. I just spoke. "Matteo," I said, my voice still a little rough, but steady. I had an experience, a very profound one." He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer solutions. He didn't try to fix my experience. He just listened. And as I recounted the essence of the emerald light, the feeling of profound peace, and the message from the child I had lost, I felt a subtle shift in him, a softening in his tone, a new vulnerability in his questions. He didn't pretend to fully understand, of course. How could he? But he heard me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly heard by my son. "Mom," he said finally, his voice thick with a complex blend of wonder and apprehension. "That's a lot. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, honey," I replied, my heart swelling with a tenderness I hadn't dared to express before. "Just know that I love you, and that I'm trying. I'm really trying to be better." That conversation was a turning point. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation, not a sudden erasure of years of distance. It was a single, fragile thread of connection, woven with honesty and vulnerability. Matteo began calling more regularly, not out of obligation, but out of a nascent curiosity, a desire to understand this changed woman who was his mother. We talked about his classes, his friends, his anxieties, the things I had often tried to fix or perfect in the past. Now I simply listened. I offered comfort, not solutions. I acknowledged his struggles, rather than trying to eliminate them. I learned to embrace the imperfect beauty of our evolving relationship, recognizing that true connection wasn't about flawless communication, but about the courage to be open and honest, even when it was uncomfortable. The heightened empathic sensitivity continued to be a revelation, a constant hum beneath the surface of my everyday life. It was as if I had acquired a new set of senses, allowing me to perceive the emotional undercurrents of the world around me. At the grocery store, I could feel the silent frustration of the elderly woman struggling to reach a high shelf, the quiet joy of a young couple holding hands as they browsed the produce aisle, the subtle anxiety of a teenager fumbling for his wallet at the checkout. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes the sheer volume of emotions could feel overwhelming, like standing in the middle of a crowded room where everyone was speaking at once. But I learned to manage it. I learned to create mental shields, to consciously filter the barrage of feelings, focusing on the ones that truly resonated or required my attention. It was like learning to tune a radio, sifting through static to find the clearest signal. This newfound sensitivity, while sometimes challenging, has been an extraordinary gift. It has made me infinitely more patient, more compassionate, and more understanding. I no longer judge people based on their outward demeanor. I can feel the silent battles they are fighting, the hidden joys they cherish. I recall one instance at David's office picnic. A new hire, a young woman, stood alone, a picture of awkwardness, her shoulders hunched, her eyes darting around the bustling crowd. My old self would have dismissed her as shy or aloof, or perhaps felt a pang of pity and moved on. But this new Maria, attuned to the subtle currents of emotion, felt her overwhelming anxiety, her desperate longing to connect. Instead of continuing my conversation, I walked over to her, a genuine smile on my face. "Hey," I said, my voice warm and inviting. "I'm Maria. This potato salad is surprisingly good. You should try some." She looked at me, her eyes widening slightly, a flicker of relief crossing her face. We talked for a few minutes about the weather, about the company, about nothing of consequence, really. But in those few minutes, I felt her anxiety begin to dissipate, replaced by a tentative sense of belonging. It was a small interaction, ordinary in its outward form, but for me, it was a profound testament to the power of empathy, of reaching out beyond the surface to connect with another human being on a deeper level. It was a moment where I wasn't striving for perfection, but simply offering genuine connection. This transformation hasn't been without its challenges. The old habits of perfectionism still whisper at the edges of my consciousness, particularly when I'm faced with a complex transcription or a demanding deadline. The instinct to meticulously reread, to obsess over every comma, every nuance, is deeply ingrained. But now, I have a powerful counterpoint. I can summon the memory of the emerald light, the profound peace of being enough, and that memory acts as an anchor, grounding me in a truth that transcends the need for flawlessness. I can remind myself that my worth is not contingent on my productivity or my precision. It is inherent, intrinsic, a gift I received in that luminous realm and continue to carry within me. The memory of that child, my child, is no longer a source of pain or regret. It is a beacon of love and acceptance. I envision her not as a lost potential, a symbol of what could have been, but as a vibrant, thriving being in a place of pure light and love. And the knowledge that she sends me her love and that she understands I did my best is the ultimate absolution. It has finally allowed me to extend that same grace, that same unconditional acceptance to myself. I am still Maria Elena Rodriguez, the bilingual court reporter. I still appreciate the beauty of a perfectly phrased sentence, the satisfaction of a job meticulously done. But my definition of job well done has expanded. It now encompasses not just accuracy and efficiency, but also compassion, connection, and presence. I no longer strive for an unattainable ideal of perfection, but for the rich, imperfect beauty of authentic living. David often watches me now with a gentle curiosity. He doesn't fully grasp the specifics of my experience, the emerald light or the profound sense of enough, but he sees the change. He feels it. He used to say I was like a finely tuned machine, every gear in place, every movement precise. Now he says I'm more like a river, flowing with a natural grace, adapting to the landscape, still powerful, but with a newfound fluidity. He understands the wife who no longer lives in fear of error, the mother who is finally present for her son, the woman who is at peace. And for him, that is enough. My relationship with Matteo continues to unfold, a testament to the power of vulnerability and the healing grace of unconditional love. We are building something new, something strong, brick by hesitant brick. The conversations are no longer about achieving some arbitrary standard of success, but about sharing our lives, our joys, and our struggles. I've learned to celebrate his individuality, to encourage his own unique path, rather than trying to mold him into a preconceived ideal. The static is gone. The hum remains, a gentle, constant reminder of the profound truths I discovered. My life, once a tightly controlled narrative, has become a flowing, vibrant story, full of unexpected turns and profound discoveries. And in this new chapter, I am not striving for perfection. I am simply living, breathing, and loving, with a heart finally at peace. The late afternoon sun still streams through my kitchen window, the crickets still sing their evening song, and Buster still naps contentedly at my feet. But now I see it all with new eyes, with a heart that finally understands the true meaning of living. And it is beautiful, truly, breathtakingly beautiful.